Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Ingram, in for Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Let's get right to the top story. No time for talking points tonight. Two major rulings from the Supreme Court on the issue of same-sex marriage. Both welcome news for advocates of gay rights. First, the justices ruled 5-4 that a crucial part of the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. DOMA, as the law is commonly known, prohibited the federal government from granting benefits to same-sex couples who are legally married by a state. So today's decision means that gay couples will now be treated the same under federal law as other married couples. In a separate split decision, the court allowed gay marriage to stand in California, but did not address the merits of the case or decide the right to marry is a constitutional right. That involved Prop 8, of course. So where does that leave almost half the country who have a different point of view? So what will the political fallout and the social fallout of these landmark rulings be? Well, joining us now from New York, Democratic strategist Bernard Whitman, and from Dallas, Robert Jeffress, the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas. All right, well, let's start with you, Mr. Whitman. This has been celebrated coast to coast by advocates of gay rights. They're not so worried that the court didn't address the issue of gay marriage as a constitutional right in that Prop 8 case. What's your take on that ruling first?
Laura, I think it's an extraordinary day for all Americans because the Supreme Court in both the decisions affirmed what a growing majority of Americans have come to realize, and that is a loving couple, be they gay or straight, should have the ability to love whoever they want and to enter into one of the most conservative and traditional structures we have in our society today, and that is the institution of marriage. And a committed couple in love and the fact that they now can enter into the institution of marriage strengthens our families, strengthens our communities, and strengthens America as a whole.
Well, so you make the point that a growing number of Americans support this, and I think you're right. I mean, clearly a growing number of Americans do. Doesn't that, though, lead one to think that maybe let the democratic process go forth so you don't have this issue thrown into this contentious arena where the court steps in and, as Justice Scalia pointed out in his dissent, kind of short-circuits the will of the American people, Mr. Whitman?
Well, I don't think so at all. In fact, I give huge credit to the framers of the Constitution because they foresaw these types of issues, and the Constitution is meant to guarantee the rights of everybody. And the rights of a minority, be they a racial minority, ethnic minority, or sexual minority, should not be put up for a vote. And the Supreme Court was very clear in saying that the government has absolutely no business to discriminate and therefore cannot prevent couples from entering into a civil marriage.
Right, but if it's a protected class, we'll get the pastor in here. If it's a protected class, that means that there invariably will be a constitutional right for gay Americans to marry, and that this will be the law of the land. Maybe not today, but down the road. Essentially, that's what
I think
Justice
that will
Scalia
happen
predicted.
over the next few years, yes.
Pastor Jeffress.
Look, Laura, in 1885, the Supreme Court said in Murphy versus Ramsey that marriage is a sacred union between a man and a woman from which all good things in society come. Now, 130 years later, this is changing. You have to ask yourself, what has changed? The Constitution hasn't changed. What has changed is the culture. The Supreme Court caved to political correctness today. And I would suggest to you that our other guest really doesn't believe what he said in constitutional rights for everybody. I mean, after all, if we have the right to love and marry whomever we want to, why not expand the definition of marriage further to include polygamists, to include siblings, to include 15-year-olds? There are sound sociological reasons, not just religious, but sociological reasons that government has historically and should continue to give preference to heterosexual marriage.
Yeah, a lot has changed since 1885, obviously, with the way the court has dealt with precedent, Pastor Jeffress.
But the Constitution hasn't.
The Constitution hasn't, but obviously we have a whole a history of recent jurisprudential decisions where the court has evolved. I mean, that's not the kind of the way I look at the court, but you know, the court has evolved, and you have elections have consequences. And Mr. Whitman, you get on this.
Laura,
okay, go ahead.
Laura, let me also point out that there are sociological reasons. You know, our friend Bill kind of got to criticize for talking about conservatives not offering a good case except for Bible thumping. Well, there is a good case beyond the Bible for traditional heterosexual marriages. In my book, I quote Princeton sociologist Sarah McClanahan, who said, if we were trying to design a situation in which to best raise a child and ensure its needs were met, it would be one in which the child is connected connected to both of its biological parents. That's not always possible, Laura, but it ought to be the preferred status, and government ought to promote it instead of discouraging it.
Mr. Whitman, you were an advisor to Bill Clinton. In 1996, of course, you weren't involved in the decision to, advocate for the Defense of Marriage Act or sign it into law, but nevertheless, wasn't that long ago, right, that Bill Clinton did sign DOMA into law. And we have 30-plus states where the American people have either through referendum or through, through other means decided for those states this is the way they view marriage. Are we to believe now that all of those states are demeaning and derogatory and dismissive in their views of gay Americans? I mean, because that was kind of the subtext of what the court said today in one of these decisions.
Lord, to give you an idea,
Kennedy was pretty clear there.
We have almost never seen in our lifetimes, or even before, such a swift change in public opinion towards a full acceptance of gays.
Then why does the court have to step in?
And
right.
The reason for that is that people are being harmed. Children are being harmed. Millions and millions of couples are legally married across the United States and are not afforded the protection by government. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to allow Pastor Jeffress to continue to suggest that children raised by gay couples are any bit less well-adjusted. In fact, there was a study just out in Australia of 500 kids that showed children of gay couples are actually healthier and get along better with their family members than do straight
No, that's
children.
not true at all. That's not true at all.
That's not the role of the court to decide.
That is not true.
The fact that you use religion to promote bigotry against gays and lesbians has to stop. The majority of Americans do not approve of your message.
Let me just end this. Let me just end this by saying,
Laura, let me respond to
that. You can respond. But what we're concerned about, what I'm concerned about, is in this conversation that we're respectful, that both sides can be heard without people who believe in traditional marriage being branded as intolerant or anti-gay. I don't like that, okay? I don't like when people are branded one thing or the other, and there better be a respectful conversation here. At least I hope so. You can wrap it up, Pastor.
Laura, I just want to remind our guest that neither he nor any of us would be here had it not been for a heterosexual union between a man and a woman. Nature teaches us, and I believe it's God, that the best relationship in which to raise a child is with a father and a mother. To say that two men can just as easily and effectively raise a child is to demean the role of women. And listen, even though culture changes and the court may change, God's word never changes. He designed marriage. He knows how it best operates.
You do not have a lock on God, sir. You do not have a lock on God, and my God does not agree with you.
This to be continued. We appreciate it. And next